strategically managing your volunteers. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the Fundraising School, and I'm joined today by Dr. Jacqueline Piatek. Jacqueline is a professor at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and she's the co-author with Jessica Sawa of a new book, Volunteer Management, a Strategic Approach. And Jacqueline, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thanks for having me, Bill. It's great to be here.
And we were delighted in hosting you not too long ago at the Indiana University Lilly Family School Philanthropy, which houses the Fundraising School, as you spoke about your research and this book. And, I guess one thing to call out, Jacqueline, just right away, and we think about the government sector, the business sector, and the philanthropic sector. The philanthropic sector is the only one that utilizes unpaid volunteers. So this is a big, important topic for us.
Yeah. Well, volunteers can be used across sectors, right? Like even for-profit hospitals and government agencies use volunteers in a number of ways, like local libraries. So volunteers are even bigger than people often think of when they first think of volunteers.
And so widespread throughout our sector, sometimes as we cross with other sectors. And you use in the title, that this is management, this is strategic. Where my mind goes, I hear those two words and I think about, the CEO who says to the team, well, just go get a bunch of volunteers. Or the board members who are volunteers themselves saying, well, just get a bunch of volunteers to do it. Sounds like this is a little bit more complicated than just go get some volunteers.
Yeah, exactly, Bill. And that was really our motivation for the book. So volunteering has always been important to me and a core area of my research. And I found patterns of inequity in volunteering where people like those looking for paid employment, those without home internet access, they may be less likely to volunteer, but those that do devote more time. And my co-author, Jessica Sawa, focuses on strategic human resource management and did work on volunteer firefighters. So we joined together and found that most volunteer management focuses from the organizational perspective, thinking volunteers will save money and just be free labor. But that's not volunteers. You need to invest in volunteer management to strategically manage volunteers for the benefit of the organization, the volunteers themselves, those served in the communities. So it's a lot more than just free labor, and you need to invest in that organizational capacity.
Jacqueline, I'd like to pick up and ask you to expand upon a word, please, when you said there are inequities when it comes to volunteerism. Could you expand upon that, please?
Yeah. So the number one reason people volunteer is because they're asked. And a lot of people just don't get invitations to volunteer. So one way to strategically manage volunteers is to more actively recruit volunteers beyond your social networks or just asking people you know.
And so making sure that we're casting the net and the spectrum of opportunity as broadly as possible for folks who could be interested in our nonprofit. I understand that the book is broken out into some different categories, starting with the needs of nonprofit organizations. How do you and your co-author describe that? The needs of nonprofit organizations as they look to bring volunteers in to help them accomplish their public service mission.
Beyond those involved in the organization, it's important to have people who are representatives of those served in the communities to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the people your organization works with and incorporating the diverse array of perspectives that your organization is trying to reach.
And what does planning look like then to make sure that those needs are taken care of? Because again, if we're going to be strategic, it seems like we just don't put up a big sign and said volunteers needed. What guidance do you have in terms of planning to prepare to bring volunteers into the nonprofit?
Yeah, so people can volunteer in a number of different ways. So you might have people volunteering remotely or people volunteering on site. Some people may be providing direct service. Some people may be helping with administration. These are all different types of volunteer roles that take different types of volunteer management, different ways of recruiting people with different types of skills. So it really depends on the type of volunteer and the needs of the organization and the volunteer's needs and matching all of those so that everyone is benefiting from the volunteer experience.
Jacqueline, if we create a staff position, we create a job description so that the new staff member knows their expectations. Do we put this in writing for volunteers as well? What advice do you have in that regard?
Yeah, it's really helpful to have volunteer descriptions, especially when onboarding people so that they have clear roles. The Just like employees, volunteers feel most engaged when they feel like they're making a difference and contributing to the mission of the organization. So having a clear role and understanding how, even if you're doing something basic like trail maintenance, seeing how, which may not feel like it's connected to the mission, if you explain to the volunteer how that connects, and then people can visit that organization and hike those trails and support the organization, and they can see how they're part of the bigger picture and contributing, then they understand the difference that they're making. And that's really what volunteers are usually looking for.
Yeah, when you talk about the needs of volunteers, fundraisers would know that there are many reasons why people donate. For some folks of middle and higher income, quite frankly, writing a check, sending a financial gift might actually be easier. Time feels more finite, and yet people are still willing to donate their time. So, like, why do people volunteer? What are those needs that nonprofits have to be aware of as they think about recruiting volunteers to their organizations?
Yeah, there are so many reasons people volunteer. They can volunteer to make friends, have something to do to fill their time. That's often why people in retirement go back to volunteer, to feel engaged and make friends. If you have a gap in your resume or are looking to expand your skills, you may volunteer, or just to use those skills. During the Great Recession, we heard about a flood of professionals going to nonprofits to volunteer just to utilize their skills. A lot of people volunteer to give back, or they believe deeply in a particular cause, so it could be their values. There are all sorts of reasons to volunteer. But also, if the organization knows those reasons, they can be sure that they're messaging and conveying and helping the volunteers meet those needs. Right? If you're looking to make friends and you're put in a position where you don't interact with people, that won't be the most meaningful volunteer experience.
And Jacqueline, when we think about what the volunteers need, also think about what they receive. And I know you're aware of the research that shows the tremendous health benefits of volunteering. What's happening in our bodies is so similar to the feelings of euphoria in terms of our synapse connections, our body chemistry. We know that there are professional associations in the United States and the United Kingdom, likely elsewhere, where mental health professionals will prescribe an hour of volunteering a week. There might be meds and there might be counseling and some other things, but it's like, hey, go out and be with other people and show that you can make a difference. Show yourself that you can make a difference and meet other people who care about things like you do, and see that there are other people having challenging situations in their lives. You're not alone. Don't stay home and ruminate. And let alone, we see, blood pressure can go down, heart health can increase. There are just so many of these health benefits from volunteering that nonprofits need to be aware of as well. Do you talk about that in your book at all? The kind of the benefits that volunteers receive?
We do. And even my own work on people who are unemployed, we find that once people are long-term unemployed, they start to detach from society. So it's really those who are recently unemployed who are looking for volunteer opportunities. And among retirees, nonprofits should be aware that you have to think of offboarding too, and people retiring from volunteering, and not just drop people off, but continue to send those birthday cards and what have you to keep people connected to the organization. Especially important for fundraisers, right? To keep in touch with your volunteers over time, even if they stop volunteering.
So we've talked about a nonprofit identifying their needs, being very intentional about the planning, being aware of the needs of volunteers, why people seek to volunteer. Talk about casting a wide net to be as inclusive as possible to as many people as possible to make folks aware of our volunteer opportunities. Well, now, Jacqueline, the folks are in our nonprofit organization. We don't just turn them loose. How do we keep them engaged? I know engagement is something that you talk about in the book.
Again, understanding the needs of your volunteers is really important. That way you're meeting their needs and connecting them to the organization and the overall mission of the organization, and making sure that people, your employees, know the role of volunteers and what they play. So even saying thank you and hi to volunteers, and it sounds so basic to engage volunteers in the organization and treat them like a fellow organizational member, but just that little bit can have people feel more attached to the organization and like they're making a difference. So having clear communication, we saw this a lot during COVID-19. Some organizations were great about maintaining contact with their volunteers, and then some were thrown in pivoting their regular operations. It was difficult to continue volunteer management, but having clear communication and engagement in managing employees.
Stay alongside. Yep. Stay alongside those volunteers, keep checking in with them, be available to problem solve. How will I know I'm successful with my volunteer management initiative within my nonprofit? What advice do you have regarding evaluation of our volunteer programs?
Yeah. So like any good process, and especially in being strategic, you have to know whether or not the volunteers in the volunteer management program are meeting the needs of the organization and volunteers. So being able to evaluate the program to know that volunteers are having a great experience and that they're serving your organization well, but also communicating that value so that you can continue to invest in volunteer management.
And Jacqueline, I've also seen other research that shows how engagement and evaluation go hand in hand by sharing with the volunteer, like, here are the expectations. And if you do this, here's what we expect will happen in a month, 8 weeks from now, in a school year, whatever the time frame might be. So it seems like staying engaged with the volunteers is a way to help them see the impact that they're making, and can also feed into the evaluation of our volunteer management program.
Yeah, exactly. A top driver of employee engagement is usually having honest performance evaluations. So evaluating volunteer performance too, and letting them know that they're achieving their goals and helping the nonprofit meet its mission.
So what about fundraisers? How can fundraisers best utilize volunteers? What are some good suggestions? What are some cautions? And can I ask my volunteer to make a financial gift? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think this is one thing that nonprofits underestimate. They think volunteers are already contributing their time and don't think to tap volunteers for also donating to the organization. But especially those volunteers that devote a significant amount of time or have been volunteering with an organization for a long time, they're some of your biggest supporters and really an untapped resource in terms of both taking on larger roles in the organization and also helping with fundraising, and not just with giving their own funds, but also considering all the promotion of the organization that they're doing to friends and family and colleagues about their volunteer experience. So investing in volunteers and strategically managing volunteers is not just about volunteer management, but also helps with fundraising and the promotion of the organization more broadly.
And by the way, one of those motivations for the volunteer is they might be playing a little bit of undercover boss, checking me out in my nonprofit organization to see if I'm trustworthy for that eventual financial donation. Dr. Jacqueline Piatek is the co-author of Volunteer Management, a Strategic Approach. And Jacqueline, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us here on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And volunteerism is actually something we talk about quite a bit through many of our courses. Principles and Techniques has an entire module devoted to volunteerism, certainly how we engage volunteers when it comes to major gifts. Volunteers are heavily needed in terms of fundraising campaigns, all sorts of ways. You're a smaller nonprofit, you need to lean into the volunteers even more sometimes. And all of this is taught in our 25 courses, leading to 5 different certificates. We're in person in 10 U.S. cities and online, both virtual, meaning live, and asynchronous, meaning recorded, of course, in the U.S. and anywhere across the world. Now, we can bring these individual courses directly to you, or you can kind of pick and choose different parts of different courses, and we will mix them together in your own customized training for your nonprofit, your region, your association. We have quarterly webinars, these weekly podcasts, and all of our knowledge gathered in our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the book now out in its 5th edition. You can find all this information online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. I'm grateful for our producers today, Jennifer Boffman, CFRM, and our Emmy Award winner, Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are not more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.